And so today we will be getting into subliminal messaging. All right. Whew. We've covered a lot, guys. When you look at it in that type of way, we've covered a lot. It's crazy. It's crazy. So let's go ahead and get into subliminal messaging. And so subliminal messaging or propaganda, they're kind of one and the same, even though they're different ways of going about it. Many of us think of subliminal messaging as just straight up, hidden things that flash across the screen or something like that. But there's more to it. There's definitely more to it than just that. That's a part of it. But there's more to it. And so we're going to go ahead and get rolling into subliminal messaging.
Subliminal advertising. For best results, do not blink.
Lime. Lemon. Lime. Lemon. Lime. Lemon.
Subliminal advertising complete.
Wait, what was that? Uncle Sam? Let me play this backwards.
Join the Navy. Join the Navy.
They're recruiting people with subliminal messages.
Yeah, so there's a few of those little clips to kind of show you what's going on, the different elements of advertising and public relations and hidden messages and stuff. Subliminal messaging is so much deeper than just what people honestly think it is. And so there is definitely a lot to this. And so when it comes to subliminal messages, advertising, propaganda, public relations, the goal is to manipulate and encourage minds, not necessarily just to buy something. Usually when we think of this stuff, we think of, it's just, companies wanting us to go and buy specific things. That's a part of it, but there's a lot more to it that has to do with developing emotional as well as physical responses to things. This includes political influence. We see this all the time. Different signs, different video clips, different little speech phrases and patterns and stuff. If you can develop these things, even stuff like catchphrases is considered subliminal messaging, if you believe that or not. I personally believe it because I did some research on it. That would actually be considered this. So when you see things, I'll just kind of throw out an example. Subliminal messaging or messaging, it's not so subliminal anymore, obviously, but something like build back better would fall under that category. Something like you're fired. Remember Trump back in his apprentice days? That would also be considered that as well. You're developing an emotional and or physical response based upon a message that you've heard repeatedly over a period of time. And so this would actually fall into the category of this. So political influence, religious responses, they do this all the time. There's different catchphrases or creeds or different words for different faiths and whatnot, as well as we've seen stuff in the media that they continue to push out there. Remember the whole Christian nationalism thing, which was a perfect tactic by Satan because that started being used as a weapon in media. And so many Christians took offense to that. And so they latched onto it without even realizing that it's actually something a part of the Seven Mountain Mandate that you really don't want to be a part. And so it was a very slick manipulation to do that. And there's still Christians to this day that don't really understand what Christian nationalism is. And so because the media weaponized it through a message that they repeated over and over and over again, subliminally, without really giving any effort or information any further than just using it as a weapon, it became a message that started to generate a response in people. And then, of course, brand association, even things like that, where we have culture wars and brand wars, the whole iPhone, Android thing, people are just, I'm this and I'm this. And it's because they have developed messaging that has influenced people to automatically have an emotional or physical response based upon that. This is all reactionary and end development of subliminal messaging that we see. Much of the development of this programming stems from Sigmund Freud. Wow, it's amazing. This dude is just bad. Don't ever get anything from Mr. Freud. But it comes from Sigmund Freud, which I've already pointed out his demonic philosophy. I talked about it on this series when it comes to the Tavistock. He was an influence when it comes to the Tavistock Institute and what that developed to be. And I've also talked about a little bit of Freud when it comes to the End Times New Age series, if you want to go and check that out as well. But Freud was fueled by trying to tap into the inner depths of people's subconscious. He wanted to reach into places that we are not supposed to reach. If we were supposed to reach those places, God would have given us the ability to do that in a safe way. He did not. We're not supposed to go there. There are things about us, our mind, our soul, our spirit, things like that we're just not fit to understand yet. But yet Freud wants to get in there, or I should say Satan wants to tap into that so he can reach the innermost workings of people and alter them or mind control them. And so he wanted to reach into the inner depths of the subconscious to reach the knowledge, emotions, and desires of those people that are hidden down below. He did much when it comes to dream interpretation and whatnot, getting people to unlock their innermost desires and emotions while they're sleeping and whatnot. This dude was sick. He was a sick, sick man. And his goal was to tap into those and begin to rewire the mind of somebody into something entirely new. Now, Tavistock, the CIA, the Nazis, etc. You can go all over the board with it. I'm just talking about some of the stuff we've covered in this series, have all expanded upon using this idea as well. This goes deep into pseudoscience, goes deep into metaphysical religion, goes deep into New Age theosophy and all that type of stuff. It's a Gnostic belief too. You're trying to unlock inner or hidden knowledge type of deal. So again, it just roots all the way right back down to there. And where we come out to this, where we come to an important point in this is a leader who utilized this same idea and the messaging of subliminal messaging. And his name is none other than Edward Bernays. This dude, we can thank for absolutely just launching this in the United States, at least, just skyward. This dude ended up taking the Freudian idea as well as subliminal messaging and propaganda and just exploding it across the United States. Now, Bernays is known as the father of public relations. That should tell you everything that you need to know, who also used the Freudian tactics in his works. Let's go ahead and check this out and see what we got going on with him.
Every day, millions of messages invade our screens. Their aim? To direct our choices in purchasing, voting, or adhering to an idea. They are omnipresent and shape our vision of the world. They rely on persuasion techniques invented a century ago in the United States. They were developed in less than 50 years by a small group of thinkers in order to control the masses. To impose their power, authoritarian regimes used force. Western democracies invented public relations. One of the group's leading theoreticians was Edward Bernays.
Public relations embraces what I call the engineering of consent based on Thomas Jefferson's principle that in a democratic society, everything depends on the consent of the people.
It really started in America with Ed Bernays, who imported and used some of Freud's psychoanalytic theories to give people in their consumer choices substitutes for sort of primal urges.
In his book Propaganda, He said it was the duty of marketing people to lead an otherwise unleadable, irrational, free people to making a consensus or a decision that was a responsible decision. And so we had a marketing philosophy that was inherently about manipulating and motivating a public.
All right, so there's several things that we want to take away from this. First of all, we'll start with the end part there where it said about manipulating and motivating society into the direction that you want them to go. We've talked about this so many times already when it comes to this Hegelian dialectic, predictive programming, and all these types of things. And then, of course, we're talking about subliminal messaging as well. And he was talking about this is what public relations, this is what propaganda, this is what this advertising and messaging is supposed to be about. The other thing that he referenced has to do with getting the public to consent to something. And we've talked about this when it comes to the Luciferians who are always telling you what they're going to do ahead of time. And the blame will not be on them. You're basically giving them consent by according to what they believe. You're basically giving them consent when you just allow them to unleash these things upon the world. And so it's the same premise being put into effect right here. Well, we told you what we're going to do. And since you didn't do anything to stop us, then you gave us your consent to do it. This is the same idea applied that was just talking about. So let's get to know Bernays a little bit better because he is a key cog in all of this. Let's take a look at some of his resume type of thing. Resume. We've got a lot going on here. First of all, he is indeed the nephew of Sigmund Freud. I bet you guys weren't ready to see that, huh? Yes, Bernays is the nephew of Sigmund Freud, so it's understandable that he would take some of Freud's ideas and apply them to what he was doing. He was also one of the lead ambassadors of Torches of Freedom. If you guys don't know what Torches of Freedom is, it was the cigarette campaign during the first wave of feminism in the United States. He tried to make cigarettes look cool for women to increase the movement of feminism. Yeah, and we've talked about how feminism is indeed a demonic movement straight from the pits of hell in the End Times New Age series, if you wanted to go and look at that. He was also connected to the CIA's overthrow of the 1954 Guatemalan government. That was codenamed PB Success. He was a part of the propaganda he created propaganda tactics that were used by the Third Reich via Nazi propaganda chief Joseph Goebbels. Basically, the Nazis reached out to Bernays because they wanted Bernays to come in and teach their propagandists to keep things moving forward. If you guys don't know, Bernays was actually a Jew. Kind of interesting how that wanted to work out there. But he declined. Bernays declined. So we're told. You just never know. But either way, his teachings of propaganda and public relations were eventually taken by Goebbels there and applied to the Nazi propaganda during that time. He was a part of the Committee of Public Information under Woodrow Wilson during World War I. He even was a part of the small committee that went over to the Paris Peace Conference during that time as well. But ultimately, he worked under Woodrow Wilson when it comes to the propaganda and public relations back in the day as well. And if you know anything about World War I, we've talked a little bit about that, but that played a big part of Pike's 3 world wars, as well as the creation of the League of Nations and all that type of stuff. So interesting that he was a part of that team. He was also the founder of Medical Review of Reviews, Sociological Fund Committee, with financing from none other than John D. Rockefeller, as well as Franklin D. and Eleanor Roosevelt. There's several other people, but I'm sure everybody will recognize those names. So he had connections and funding from them. And then, of course, this was a big one. He is the great uncle to Netflix co-founder and first CEO, Mark Randolph. I find it fascinating that one of the biggest media propaganda places out there today is Netflix. And the co-founder and first CEO of Netflix just happens to have a great uncle who is Bernays. Very interesting. So as we can see, he's got a lot of influence, a lot of experience in different areas, all revolving around propaganda, public relations, messaging, advertising, getting all this stuff out. He's also got a history when it comes to advertising campaigns for General Electric and a whole bunch of these other large corporations out there. Now, if we take a look at a quote from his book, we'll find an even deeper understanding of how subliminal messaging and propaganda plays a part in forming societal constructs. So from his book, Propaganda, we heard reference to that in the clip. But it says, the conscious and intelligent manipulation of the organized habits and opinions of the masses is an important element in democratic society. Those who manipulate this unseen mechanism of society constitute an invisible government, which is the true ruling power of our country. We are governed, our minds are molded, our tastes are formed, and our ideas suggested, largely by men we have never heard of. It is they who pull the wires that control the public mind. Again, this goes back to having that shadow government that are over there, or as Plato would say, the rulers who control the culture. And he's making the same reference here, but he's applying it in the direction of this isn't possible. He's applying it in the direction of they are doing it. He's saying that they are actively doing it because they are. Everything that we see out there when it comes to propaganda, when it comes to messaging, when it comes to advertisement, when it comes to all types of media, all these things are all under control of somebody who gives them permission to do so. And we see the different groups forming against them, quote unquote. And we've talked about this when it comes to controlled opposition, Operation Trust. They're being put in there, and they're fully manipulated to give people an idea of hope, an array of hope, and a way of fighting back a form of resistance that doesn't actually exist. It's just there to give you the idea of that. So you're over there busy chasing your own tail. All the while, they continue to control and move society in the direction that they want to go. And he's actively telling us that that is what's going on. That is the job of advertisement. That is the job of propaganda. That is the job of media. That is the job of public relations, is to do exactly what he just said in his propaganda book. So this is an idea of the explosion. Obviously, he didn't create it, but this was the explosion of propaganda throughout United States society. And he helped formulate different areas when it comes to government, to corporations and advertising, as well as other things as well. But we can fully see here that there is something much deeper, darker going on, and all of this stuff is to control and manipulate the minds. Because he tells it flat out. We are governed, our minds are molded, our tastes formed, and our ideas suggested. That should just give you an idea that what you actually like and what you adhere to and the things that you use and your beliefs and ideas on some of this stuff, are they actually yours? I know that's a creepy thought. That is a very creepy thought, but you got to think, are they actually yours, or have you just been pushed into that because of the propaganda that we got going on? That's something that you got to think and pray about yourself. Something you got to think about and pray about yourself. Now, if we move more into the more subliminal type of region, we will move into the subtle level of a market researcher by the name of James Vicary. James McDonald Vicary, who was a market researcher. And in 1957, Vicary ran a test in a New Jersey theater where he would very quickly flash messages of hungry, eat popcorn, and drink Coca-Cola during the movie. So this is what we would normally think of when it comes to subliminal messages. You know, those super fast, like 1 of a 300-second message that flashes across the screen that we don't actively pick up, but the subconscious picks up on it. This is what we would normally think of when it comes to subliminal messaging. And so Vicary here ran this test in New Jersey where he would put those up there. And so he reported that both popcorn and Coke consumption increased significantly, and this led to a massive career boost for him, with which brought in, speaking appearances as well as advertising consultancy and everything like that. He ended up making like a net worth of like $400 million, which back in the day, that's a crazy ton of money. But ultimately, he said this led to a giant consumption because people were being manipulated through subliminal messaging, because they would just, their subconscious would recognize that. And all of a sudden they're going, I could go for some popcorn, or, I could go for a Coke. And so he's saying that the sales went up because of it. But did it? Did it really? Well, we'll see. Coming along with it was the attention of the TV networks and radio stations who pursued subliminal messaging in their programs. So basically, they saw what Vicary did. They saw the after effects, or what he reported the after effects were, and they wanted to get in on that. They said, "Oh, this is great. We can sell more advertising space to these companies. They'll pay top dollar for subliminal messaging that we will play through our TV shows as well as our radio programs, and they'll start to see an increase in money, and we can charge money for those spots." And so they started to get in on it. This was a big thing back in the day. I'm sure some of you were back then there to see it. Maybe you remember this whole thing that was going on. And so TV stations would flash. They actually did this back in the day. TV stations would flash ads during their programming, while radio stations would run whisper tracks under the music being played to influence users. So not only were you getting advertisements during commercials on TV, but you would also get those flashes, the subliminal messaging flashes during TV programs, which you never really technically picked up on because they were so fast. It was only the subconscious to take it. Radio stations played whisper tracks. While music was playing, they would have a track playing underneath of somebody whispering, like drink 7-Up or buy Wonder Bread or something like that. And they would whisper it very faintly underneath the music in order to try and reach the subconscious of people. This was actively going on back in the day. This started, of course, causing some panic. Society started getting in a panic. They're going, what are they doing to us? They can't be doing this. And so people got into a panic, which, again, the moment you throw on a screen, I mean, what else do you expect? That's how it's going to go. As well as controversy came over with Vicary, where he ended up going to Washington to explain the whole process to Congress. So he got called into Washington because he was the man behind the plan, so to say. And so he ended up going to Congress to basically communicate his study and his research and what was really going on. And so what happened while that was going on, basically the TV networks started getting together to see if they could counter what was going on. And so they formed the National Association of Broadcasting, or the NAB, in which they claimed that they agreed to stop subliminal messaging. Did they? That's the question. Now, I personally don't believe that they stopped. I believe that they continue to do it to this day. Just because we got to remember, lying does exist. We have to remember that lying does exist, and they're constantly finding new ways to try and go after people through advertisements and selling things and manipulating, political, religious ideologies and all that type of stuff. So why on earth would they give up something like this? I don't think that they did, even though that they said that they didn't. And so I think that's something that actually is still going on today. But that's up for you to decide. I don't necessarily have anything that proves that they do it. I'm just going off of track record of how these people operate, and I don't trust them any further than my hand, basically. Along with that, the networks came out saying that it was actually not effective, that it wasn't an effective tactic. And Vicary then stepped down from consulting and claimed it was all a hoax and never even ran the initial experiment to begin with. So not only did the TV networks form a broadcasting group and said, we're not going to do this, they started coming out and doing damage control, saying it doesn't work, it wasn't effective. And then Vicary stepped down and said he never even ran the thing and it was all one giant hoax. See, when you see that, when you hear that news regarding that, that sounds like a public relations stunt. And who was the master of that? And so we start to see this in a more light of they're just lying through their teeth, and they're continuing to do it today. Now, what adds even more background and validity to all of this, if say you're on the fence and you're like, okay, I don't believe that it actually works and stuff like that. Well, something else that adds validity to it is the fact that this was now being studied at the time by the CIA. And so even the CIA got in on this and started doing research into this, the operational potential of subliminal perception. And of course, that's due. Perception is demonstrated to have occurred below the threshold of conscious sensory experience when a person responds to a stimulus too weak in intensity or too short in duration for him to be aware of it. And it goes through the different studies and research and things that they've done that the CIA was working on when it comes to subliminal messaging. It all has to do with going under the radar of people's conscious as well as their perception and reaching the subconscious in order to manipulate. And so the CIA was definitely involved with studying this type of thing as well. And again, who's in the back pockets of the CIA and all this stuff? TV networks, Operation Mockingbird and all that type of stuff. Everything's all in cahoots. So again, when they come out and say, we're not doing it, it was ineffective, it was a scam, it was a hoax, I sit there and go, you cheeky people, you're still doing it. You're still doing it. Just like they came out after all the documents of MK Ultra were destroyed. And they're still doing that stuff to this day as well. Never stopped. So why would this stop as well? Mockingbird's still in effect as well. It's just amazing. And that goes. So I still personally believe that it's going, but that's up to you to decide. Who knows? Maybe I've got some of my own subliminal messaging going on during this show. I don't have that ability. But anyways. So the question is, does it really work? Well, I got a couple of examples here. Back in the 1980s, when the advancement of brain reading technology was increasing, tests were being done to see if subliminal messaging played an effect on the brain, and if it did, what parts of the brain did it hit? So this is back when technology started to really expand. They're able to read brain waves and activities and be able to pinpoint certain areas that were receiving more stimulation or energy for whatever was being done to the person or any stimulus that was being given to them. And so this technology started to advance. And so what they did is they started to use this technology to determine if subliminal messaging actually did affect certain parts of the brain. If it was, because we can't actively perceive this stuff happening, is the brain actually perceiving it, even though we don't think we are? And if it is, what parts of the brain was it actually hitting? What parts were actually being affected by it? So a test was run by a man named William Kilmore, or Kilborn, not Kilmore, Kilborn, here. And it's William Kilborn, Scott Payton, and Danny Ridley. This was back in the 80s. And they ran a test called the effects of sexual embedding on responses to magazine advertisements. So this had to do with, could we get a response in somebody's brain through some type of sexual arousal in a magazine ad? And it's not like, the explicit stuff, but it's hidden, subliminal. Again, it has to do with that. That's the whole point of the thing. So they did a test reading of galvanic skin response for magazine ads. Now, if you don't know what galvanic skin response, or GSR, is reads the electrical changes of skin sweat glands and can determine a change in excitement, arousal, or stimulation. So this has to do with, it's not goosebumps. I had to make sure I checked this out. Goosebumps has to do with nerves and stuff. This GSR has to do with reading sweat glands. And so if somebody has an arousal, if somebody's excited, or they have a burst of energy because of, something exciting going on type of deal, the electrical nodes in your sweat glands will change. And so this is built to read that to see if something can be determined by what somebody is looking at and see that reaction. So what they did is they showed a cigarette ad that had two cowboys riding next to a bunch of large rocks. And so they had a regular advertisement, same picture, of just a picture. And then they had another advertisement. And what they did is they very subtly had an artist go in and change one of the rocks to make it look like male genitalia. And if you're just glancing at it, you really can't tell. But when you put them side by side, you could, but they tested them individually, not side by side. And what they happened to come across is a large group of the test subject. I think it was like 400 and something people I think they tested. The majority of them reacted more strongly to the advertisement that was adulterated as opposed to the one that wasn't. If you guys aren't catching on what I'm saying here, you guys have ever heard the term sex sells? This is exactly what it has to do with. These little things can be found in advertisements all over the place, and they've been doing it for a very long time. Obviously, there's the more upfront ones out there, but there's much more subtle ones as well, like the rocks. If you really aren't paying attention, but the subconscious is indeed picking up on it. And so that's where that comes from, because people are more naturally attracted to that without even realizing it in some cases. And so this is put that way. And we see it all the time too in Disney movies and other things like that. There's different ones out there. I'm sure some people have seen. There's like the thing at the Little Mermaid. There's actually several in the Little Mermaid. There's one from like the Lion King, the Rescuers. And there's I think Ratatouille's got something as well. And when you watch these stuff, they're just you can't even recognize it. But because we have the ability to pause now, unlike back then, we can pause and find these things. But ultimately, these things were just so quick, but they were putting it in there. And so whether you're an adult, like for this magazine, or whether you're a child in Disney movies, they are injecting that in there, and your subconscious is indeed being affected by it, which makes you wonder of what is going on when it comes to the repercussions of society that we see today. Now, that's above my pay grade. That's something that I don't know. But something tells me the effects are there, and because of what we're seeing in society, the absolute degeneration of society that's going on today, something tells me that this played a part. I'm not saying it's the whole reason, but I believe that it absolutely played a part in the degeneracy of what we see in society today, the falling of society that we got going on today. And I firmly believe that. We also see things when it comes to Warner Brothers cartoons. If you guys don't know, back in the times of World War II, they developed specific Warner Brother cartoons in order to be pro-American, pro-war. You can find those; those are pretty obvious. But there's other ones that are a little bit more hidden when it comes to things like financial or political or even sexual subliminal messages that were put in there that you can find to this day. Whether it's a magazine poster that's only there for a second, or an object getting turned around with letters written on there only for a split second. Your brain's not picking up on it, but your subconscious is indeed picking up on it. So here's the question. What about on a bigger long-term scale? We're seeing something like, okay, you got those little things here and there, and so what? Those are little magazines and everything like that. What about on a bigger and long-term scale? Is there actually evidence? Is there actually something that can substantial that can point to this being used on a much larger societal level to influence on a bigger topic, a bigger subject, a bigger range of things? Well, if we go back to 2016, a research paper was released in the National Institute of Health. Yes, that National Institute of Health, the one connected to the U.S. government that's all involved with just do a little looking into what they're a part of. I'm sure you guys understand it. But there was something released by the National Institute of Health confirming that subliminal messages have long-term effects on decision making. So if we take a look, it says subliminal messages exert long-term effects on decision-making. This was published in 2016. Hang with me. It's a lot to read, but I think it's very important. So subliminal manipulation is often considered harmless because its effects typically decay within a second. So far, subliminal long-term effects on behavior were only observed in studies which repeatedly presented highly familiar information, such as single words. These are, again, the flashing on the screen, quick things from like Vicary and whatnot. These studies suggest that subliminal messages are only slowly stored and might not be stored at all if they provide novel, unfamiliar information. Now, this is key. This is very key. Unfamiliar information. Things, if you guys don't know how the brain works, is it loves order. The brain loves order. It loves familiarity. It loves things that it knows, that it's comfortable with. When the brain starts to experience chaos and things out of order and stuff that it's not necessarily used to, it starts sending the brain in crazy directions. That's why when we look at technology, when it comes to them like creating stem cell brains and stuff, they reward the brain through sugar and comfortable electrode signals. And when the brain does something bad, it sends chaotic shocks to it because it doesn't like it. And so this is key when it comes to subliminal messaging. If you throw something at the brain subliminally that is out of order, that it's not familiar with, it's not necessarily going to catch on to it. But if it's something that it is familiar with, I don't know, say through something like predictive programming, which has introduced an idea to you in more ways than not, when it finally gets presented to you formally, it's going to be more inclined to believe it. So this is very key, and it works hand in hand with predictive programming. So that is a huge, huge important piece when it comes to this. So it says, we speculated that subliminal messages might affect delayed decision-making, especially if messages contain several pieces of novel information that must be relationally bound in long-term memory. Relational binding engages the hippocampal memory system, again, the memory system of the brain, which can rapidly encode and durably store novel relations. Here, we hypothesize that subliminally presented stimulus pairs would be relationally processed, influencing the direction of delayed conscious decision. We'll just kind of move past that, don't worry. In experiment 1, subliminal face occupation pairs affected conscious decisions about the income of these individuals almost half an hour later. So basically, they showed two individuals with two specific looking faces with two income jobs presented with it. And the decision making of the people who were being affected by this lasted up to 30 minutes after the subliminal message was presented to them. So that's quite long, longer than they were expecting. In experiment 2, subliminal presentation of vocabulary of a foreign language enabled participants to later decide whether these foreign words are presented with correct or incorrect translation. So basically, they were presented foreign words, and then to determine if it was correct or incorrect translation on a language that they don't necessarily know. Subliminal influence did not significantly decay if probed after 25 minutes versus 15 minutes. So up to 25 minutes, it was still fully there in the subconscious of the person. This is unprecedented evidence that the longevity and impact of subliminal messages on conscious, rational decision making. So I know it's a lot of words, a lot of, what. I know I probably just lost some people, but they ran 2 tests. One had to do with like a visual face, and the other one had to do with words. And the subconscious through subliminal messaging was able to hold on to that information to up to 30 minutes afterwards. And this was just a one-off deal. This wasn't just, pounding over and over and over and over again like you're trying to indoctrinate somebody. No, this just was a one-off deal, and it held on for that long. Just imagine how it works when you start feeding the same thing, the same message over a long period of time repeatedly, what that's going to start doing to a human. I think, again, we are seeing those effects in society. So when we go to the conclusion, it says, to summarize, subliminal, verbal, and non-verbal item pairs influenced participants' conscious, deliberate decisions almost half an hour following subliminal stimulation. So this affected people's deliberate choosing, their deliberate decisions, almost up to 30 minutes. That is a huge thing, and that was just a one-off deal. Just one. If they can get people to actually consciously choose something based solely off of a subliminal message like that up to 30 minutes afterwards, again, when you pound the same stuff into people's heads, what are the effects actually going to be? I think we're seeing that. I think they've got that down. They've got it on patented. They've got it locked in, and they're using it every single day on all of us without us even realizing it. I'm seeing the effects of it out there. I am. Absolutely. I can just imagine the effects it has on me that I don't actually recognize. Now, there's some things I've been able to break through. And I know I've seen even some people in the chat. I've seen some of you people have finally broken out of that stuff too when it comes to some of this other stuff. And it's great, but there's still more that's going on. That's why I'm so looking forward when we can leave this world, leave this earthly body, this earthly mind behind, and get our new bodies. And we're not going to have to worry about this manipulation, this mind control garbage that Satan continues to just pound on us day in and day out. And again, this is exactly why the word of God continues just repeatedly: guard your mind, protect your mind, continue to keep your mind on things above, because the Lord knows that this is what we're up against. This is the fight that's really going on. It's not this physical stuff. It is the mental, spiritual stuff that's just constantly coming at us, because Satan knows that's the way to get to people. That's exactly the way to get to people, is through that. And so subliminal stimulation can influence one's conscious and deliberate decisions. So I wonder how on earth this could be used in the world. I'm sure you guys can think of a few ways and a few areas that it's currently being used. So we went from the father of public relations and his involvement when it comes to advertising and propaganda and all this type of stuff. Then we moved into the more subliminal thing with Vicary and the advertisements and quick flashing subliminal stimulation and magazine stuff and all this type of propaganda that they continue to push. Well, what about famous hidden messages in music? What about famous hidden messages in music when played backwards? I'm sure some of you guys have come across this as well. So there's a few of them out there. I just picked a few that I'm familiar with. But one would be the famous "Paul is Dead" from the Beatles. I don't know if you guys remember this. You can find messages and images and all this stuff, and you go into different music things like Strawberry Fields, and I think there's a couple other ones that do with "Paul's Dead," "I Buried Him," "I Miss Him," and all that type of stuff. There's pictures where you see all over the place Paul always has a hand over his head. He has no shoes in the cigarette and is walking out of step on the Abbey Road picture. And so there's this huge thing going about Paul McCartney actually died in a car crash back in 1966, and they replaced him with a lookalike. And it's been him ever since. And so they said that there was famous albums that you could play backwards and get hidden messages when it comes to the Beatles. Another one has to do with Judas Priest, who actually went to court. If you guys don't know this, Judas Priest went to court because of two kids who were listening to the Judas Priest album, a specific song. I can't remember it off the top of my head. "Better You Than Me" or something like that. I can't remember. But basically, one committed suicide. He took his own life with a shotgun. And the other one attempted to do the same thing, but he actually survived and just blew off the front of his face. You can find interviews with him. I'm not going to show it. It's pretty grotesque. But they actually went to court because these kids, they said that they were listening to the same song over and over again, and they kept hearing the word "do it, do it, do it" silently underneath the words, and they ended up doing it, which is going and killing themselves. How they came to that conclusion, we still don't know, but that's what they claim. And what's interesting is what came out of this is Judas Priest actually admitted that they indeed put subliminal messages in their music. They just didn't put it in that song. So they owned up and said, "We put subliminal messages in our music. Something to think about. Then there's the most famous one, in my opinion. I know the Beatles one is pretty big when it comes to many people know about it, but I think this is the most spiritually famous one when it comes to this. It has to do with Led Zeppelin and their song Stairway to Heaven. And apparently there is a backwards message that has to do with praising Satan. And that's where Led Zeppelin gets their power from. Check this out.
Backwards it says, "Here's to my sweet Satan." Did you hear that? Listen carefully. It says, "I want to live it backwards like the Zepp, whose power is Satan." Did you hear that?
If you listen, they're there.
Yeah, I heard them all. That's crazy. But it was definitely put there on purpose and maybe just for certain people to hear it.
I could definitely hear the words in there.
How did someone even find that out? Almost like a conspiracy theory, in my opinion, that's like, oh, there's hidden messages in this.
The only thing I really heard was music. It kind of sounded like it was in a different language. It was kind of scary. I mean, it sounded like it was saying something, but in a different language.
Backward masking, you know, and the Beatles and Paul is Dead or any of that kind of stuff. To me, that was just all the fun stuff. That if you were a fan, you looked for that kind of stuff and you wanted to find it. The idea of it being dark or malevolent, you know, I think is just kind of paranoid thought on the part of people that already don't like the music. I never really saw anything of harm coming from backward masking.
Very interesting. That last guy who was talking, by the way, is a guy from Devo, so he's all wrapped up into it as well. But what I find interesting is he specifically talks about it's just people who don't like that music that are finding a way to criticize it or something. So if you guys don't know, I am a musician, or I guess you could say former musician. I haven't picked up an instrument in years. But one of my favorite bands of all time was Led Zeppelin. One of my top 3 drummers of all time that because I'm a drummer, that I looked after and I formed my musician ability after, and I played to and everything, was John Bonham from Led Zeppelin. I was a huge Led Zeppelin fan. Loved everything about him before, you know, I started looking into all the stuff going on. And, you know, it's one of those things where he says, oh, it's only the people who don't like that type of music that are looking for some. Well, to this day, I now look at it and go, it's completely satanic. All the stuff that Led Zeppelin was wrapped up into, and I won't listen to them anymore. They're a band that I absolutely will not listen to. If they come up on the radio, I'll change the station. I want nothing to do with them, but I love them back in the day. So it has nothing to do with that. It just has to do with the people that are actually trying to pay attention to what's going on when it comes to this type of music. So again, I will disagree with him on that one for sure. Now, whether you believe that this stuff is actually going on in messages going backwards and this type of stuff, masking as they call it, is actually going on, it's up to you. I'm not sitting here trying to change your mind one way or the other. I'm just presenting things to you. But keep in mind when it comes to Led Zeppelin, that Led Zeppelin was fully centered on occultism. All the symbology, much of the music that they played, the notes and the drum tempos, I've looked into this stuff, is all centered upon occultism. Keep in mind also that Jimmy Page, who's the guitarist for Led Zeppelin, was obsessed with Aleister Crowley, as well as Thelema, as well as alchemy. Obsessed. He practiced it. He recorded in the homes of these people and everything like that. He just loved it. And so why on earth would he not do something about that? And then, as well, as I've talked about this before, the song Stairway to Heaven, people don't realize, is actually written about the harlot that is in Revelation 17. Fascinating, right? Quite fascinating. So it's up to you to decide if they actually put the masking, the backward masking, the backwards messaging in their music. But just keep that in mind. Those are the same people. Those are the same people that put it in there. Satan can, has, and will absolutely use these things to hide messages, whether the people who are creating it know they're there or not. That's an element that you also got to keep in mind. They have the ability to tap in and put these things in there, even if the people don't know that it's going on. The artists, that is. And when it comes to backward messages, there's enough there to even interest the CIA. And what do I mean by that? Well, for this, we will have to go to a guy by the name of David John Oates. Back in 1983, a man named David Oates dropped his Walkman. Yes, the old classic Walkman cassette tapes. You guys remember those? Into a toilet. And what it did is it ended up making everything play backwards. He began to study others' speech, not just for music, but just people communicating. He would study their speech. And basically, he claims that our brains will hide messages backwards in our forward speech. What does that mean? Well, I'm talking forward right now. And what he claims is every 30 seconds or so of me speaking, there is going to be a hidden message, usually a truth message, that's, if you play my speech backwards, will appear. That's what he claims. And after he dropped his Walkman, he started studying this stuff. He started going over presidents and officials. He started going over just anybody he could record, started going over old speeches, actors and whatnot on TV. He started recording all these and going backwards. And he started to apparently come up with this idea that there are indeed hidden messages in our speech without us even realizing it. This, of course, intrigued the CIA, and they began to research it as well. And so this is from the CIA. They started doing research on David John Oates and his reverse speech, hidden messages, and hidden communication. And so Oates started doing work with the CIA in order to determine if there was anything going on with this. According to Oates, reverse speech is basically just another language that anybody can learn. There are people out there that you can find that they basically studied it like another language, and they're able to speak in reverse, and they will do it perfectly. This isn't like a joke thing. You can find the videos. I don't have anything to show, but there are videos of these guys who they will speak backwards, and when you play it reverse, it sounds like they're talking forward because it's just another language. And so how on earth are we hiding these messages in reverse with our forward speech? Well, according to Oates, he says that reverse speech is actually the first language we learn as babies before we replace it with forward speech. Interesting. He says that as we're babies, our first language is speaking backwards. And then as we grow older, we learn to speak forwards like we do today. And so that language that we had when we were children never actually goes away. It just hides itself within our forward speech without us really realizing it. It's our own subconscious that's naturally coming out in that. Is it possible that this is really what's going on? I don't know. maybe there's something more to it. Maybe there's something there that we don't realize. I'm not saying one way or the other. That's up to you to decide. Is it possible that this is used to communicate between two people on purpose? I believe it absolutely can be. As we know, they use hidden languages and ciphers and written words and code words and stuff. It's been going on since the very beginning. Seriously, it's been going on for so long that, sure, I believe that they're actually using hidden messages and forward speech that if you play backwards, you can get something from it. But that seems to be more on a purpose-based thing, like something that, I don't know, like the CIA or some type of secret society would use or something. Again, go back to like the Knights Templar. They had the @bash cipher and all that type of stuff. Coded language has been around for a long time. As far as, actually having it when we're babies and the hidden messages, But again, it's up to you to decide. I'm not going to sit here one way or the other because I don't have anything definitive on it. I don't have anything that validates it, but I also don't have anything that fully discredits it either. So again, I think that's just one of those things that we're just going to have to just ponder, hinge on until we go home and we can determine if it actually is real or not. There's a bunch of stuff out there like that you wouldn't ever believe that is true, but it actually is. Shocking. But beyond that, your guess is as good as mine. Beyond actually using it on purpose, your guess is as good as mine. What we do know is that subliminal messaging is real. What we do know is subliminal messaging does work. And what we do know is subliminal messaging can be used in many ways for very nefarious purposes. And I believe that we are actively seeing the effects of subliminal messaging on society today. So, at the end of this series, whenever I do series on stuff like this, I usually, throughout the period of time, I usually get comments and emails from people saying, why are you talking about this? What on earth does this have to do with anything for a Christian? How is this biblical? What does this have to do with anything like that? Well, again, why do we talk about this? Why the emphasis on mind control and psychological warfare and brainwashing and identity hijacking and all these random things like this? Well, I'll reverse the question, counter question you, and go, why do we constantly and consistently get told in Scripture to guard our minds and set them on things above? If you're going to ask why we talk about these things, well, I counter question, why on earth does the Bible tell us to guard ourselves? Because we are to guard ourselves from the exact things that we have been pointing out during this series. Something to think about. Because Satan is actively targeting the mind. And a few scriptures that I've held on to during this series really points to this. If we go to 2 Corinthians 10, 3-6, says, for though we walk in flesh, we do not war according to the flesh. Let's just sit on that one for a second. For though we walk in flesh, we do not war according to the flesh. We are in a spiritual war. And part of that has to do with assaulting the mind. Satan is coming at the mind in any possible way he can. He's using every tactic that he can. He's going to use every outlet that he can, every resource that he can. And he's going to be shifting up tactics according to our individual walls and guards and whatnot. He's going to try and come after us, whether it's subliminally, whether it's through the media or through predictive programming, through different code words and language used out there, whether it's through the Hegelian dialectic, whether it's through cults or religious followings, political followings, Q movements, and controlled opposition. He's going to use all of these things against us. Those are not physical. Those are not physical, but they are indeed assaults on the mind. Verse 4, for the weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but mighty in God for pulling down strongholds, casting down arguments and every high thing that exalts itself against the knowledge of God, bringing every thought into captivity to the obedience of Christ, and being ready to punish all disobedience when your obedience is fulfilled. This is back when when the assault from the false teachers was coming at Paul here. And he said that while they use physical means to come at me, this is indeed a spiritual warfare, and his weapon, our weapon, is not physical like they use, the tactics that they use. No, our weapon is God, who will tear down these strongholds, their strongholds, as long as we continue to set our mind, our sight on things above. So we must bring every thought into captivity to the obedience of Christ. We must control our thoughts, control what goes into our heads, what comes out of our mouths. And we must continue to guard our minds and protect our minds from things like we just discussed, not only tonight, but throughout this entire series. This is why we talk about this stuff, things that many Christians will look at and go, why on earth are you talking about this? What does this have to do with anything Bible? What does this have to do with the church? What does this have to do with Christianity? Well, in today's environment, it has everything to do with everything. Another one that I hold to is Romans 12, 1 through 2. Says, I beseech you, therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that you present your bodies a living sacrifice, wholly acceptable to God, which is your reasonable service. And do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God. We are not to conform to this world. Question every tactic that we've gone over, not only tonight, but throughout this entire series. What is it about? What is the target? If you can narrow everything down to one specific goal, what is it? To conform the mind of people to what Satan wants and of the world. Romans is specifically telling us not to do that, to not allow that to happen to us. The mind control wants us to go directly and conform to what the world wants, what Satan wants. Remember, this is his world right now. He owns this thing, and he wants everybody to conform to it. We are not to do so. We are directly commanded not to allow that to happen. How? We are to be transformed by the renewing of our mind. We must protect ourselves, guard ourselves, renew our mind in the Word of God through prayer, through Christ-like fellowship. We are to continue to renew our mind by setting it on the classic saying of what would Jesus do? We are to continue to think of good things, to subdue the bad thoughts, to push them out and then bring in the thoughts that center themselves on Christ. We are to continue to keep our minds protected through Scripture, through the Word of God, the living, breathing Word of God, through prayer and through fellowship with each other as Christians and believers, to encourage each other, to help keep each other accountable, to help protect not only our own mind, but those of our brothers and sisters. This is exactly what we're supposed to be doing. And the mind control tactics, these things that we talked about, are trying to pull that away from us. They're trying to pull us into conforming to the world. And we are to do the exact opposite. See, we talk about these things specifically like this because we are told to be aware and protect ourselves from these exact topics that we have just talked about in this series. I think it's unfortunate. I think it's a disservice as prophecy watchers and Christians and specifically the leadership and the talking heads that don't want to talk about this stuff, that put this stuff off, that find no need to talk about it when this is actively something that the Word of God has told us that we need to be aware of and protect ourselves from. Maybe not, naming it directly, but I just gave you a couple verses that I've held on to that have helped guide me on this thing. It's conspiracy theory. Oh, that's pointless. That has nothing to do with anything. We're just going to rehash the same topic for the 500th time because that's what we're going to do. But ultimately, I think this stuff is extremely important. Extremely important when it comes to our walk, specifically as Christians in this time. in this specific time point, in this age that we're currently in right now. I think this is so important because I continue to see so many Christians conform to what the world wants. I see so many Christians literally falling into the exact traps of these topics that we've talked about all the time. I see it everywhere, but they don't see it themselves. Why? Because they're not educated. They haven't had people tell them about this. They haven't had any interest in it because they're writing it off saying that's not important. I think it's extremely important. I think it is. Why do I think it is? It's not my opinion. It's because the Lord has told us that it's important. We must protect ourselves.